Actually, hold on. I realize if I do it this way, I won't be able to see any questions. So just a second. One moment. Okay. So can everyone see my desktop?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So thanks for joining us today for this 2019 campaign recap for NewGen ISS and TIP. We're going to start with NewGen ISS and then we'll cover transparency and payments, although you'll see there's, as usual, quite a bit of overlap in the campaigns for each. So in terms of NewGen ISS, I thought we would start with a little bit of a status overview, given that it's been some time since we had a webinar with the local offices in terms of where NewGen ISS is at. So status update and as well the 2019-2020 migration timelines, and then we'll wrap with the campaigns. So as of March 1st, we have NewGen ISS in full rollout mode, where it's now been introduced to Resolution 812 in 48 countries, with TIP in 52. So we see that we're going ahead quite full speed with the migrations. In terms of this year, the goal, there's actually a goal from the Board of Governors, a target for us, which is to introduce NewGen ISS, namely the remittance holding capacity, in markets which represent 90% of BSP cash sales. So if we look at the targets, as of today, we're sitting at about 35%. We expect to reach that 90% target sometime in November, and then that will get us to the goal for the year. Okay, and then all the remaining countries would be in 2020. So to give you a little bit of an overview of where we're at today, so just some operational statistics. So as of January, so this was what we had presented to the PSG. As of January, we had rolled out NewGen ISS with about a population of approximately 11,000 agents covered. That's head entities. Of those agents, in the month since go live, 400 agents had reached 100% of their remittance holding capacity, with a total of 1,350 alerts. So this represents a population of approximately 3.6% of the agents having reached their RHC at least once, which is very much in line with the numbers that we had during the dry run. So it's not far from what was expected. Okay, now at that same time, if we look at the agents who reached 75% of their remittance holding capacity, that was 705 agents, so about 6% of all agents. So we see that with the current remittance holding capacity calculation, most agents are not regularly reaching their RHC or even getting to 75%. Okay,
Can I ask you a question?
Of course, go.
Can we share these statistics at the APJCs?
This one, the remittance holding capacity, sure, we've shared it with the APJC. Okay, so this one, the agents have also received it, so that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Okay, so that's remittance holding capacity, and I know sometimes we get questions about how that actually breaks down into the population of agents given the new risk statuses. So if we look at the risk status distribution, we have agents, the majority of agents actually continue to fall under risk status A. And so that would mean no mandatory financial security unless it's required in the local financial criteria. So majority of agents are still in this risk status, and yet they actually make up less than the majority of agents reaching their RHC. Okay, so we actually see most agents who reach their RHC are either risk status B or disproportionately, we see a very high number of risk status C agents as well. Okay, so they're only 8% of the total population, and yet they reach their RHC 25% of times. So that's just for your awareness, in case there's any interest in such figures. Now, in terms of IATA Easy Pay statistics, it's kind of distorted the graph. So we see that it was a little slow picking up, but then we did see some kind of an uptake in adoption in the third and fourth quarters of the year. So we had at the end of the year about 9,000 transactions issued on Easy Pay. And then just by the end of January, that was at about 12,000, just under 12,000. So it's been quite an uptake there. Now, this statistic is actually not being shared externally. We're only sharing it with FinDev and with PSG for a number of reasons, given all the politics around Easy Pay with some of the GDSs and the agency associations as well. Okay, so this one is just for your reference. And just some key points to highlight. So we are seeing it used by GoLight and Go Standard agents. One of the things we wanted to highlight is that the main reason why agents are taking up Easy Pay is actually not RHC management. So we have to introduce Easy Pay as a condition for going live with NewGen ISS because it provides a fail-safe for travel agents who reach their remittance holding capacity, so a way to keep transacting. It's also been very useful for airlines sort of as a benchmark when we consider other forms of payment. So it's an industry payment method and gives them a way to benchmark with alternative transfer methods. And so it's really important that we have this tool available. But the feedback that we're getting is that they're looking at the other features of IATA Easy Pay, and more often than not, agents are waiting for airlines guidance. So it's really important here for airlines to communicate their Easy Pay policy. If the airlines are not going to communicate that, agents are going to sit on the fence, let's say. Okay, we've got that sort of communicated to us on a number of occasions. Okay, so here it belies the importance of airlines publishing their overall payment acceptance policies and including in that what their policy is towards Easy Pay. Okay, and that will fit in as well with what we're requesting from airlines on the TIP side. Okay, so that's on Easy Pay. And just in terms of operational statistics, this was over a week ago, but I think we're almost closer to 200 now. So the pickup on the GoLight accreditation is quite substantial. So we see it progressing in recent months quite a bit. So we're almost at 200. So if you compare in 2 months, we almost doubled the population. Okay, so we see there's definitely demand in discussing with agents. Okay, so those are the stats on NewGen ISS at the moment. Since not all of you have been involved in a country that's live, just to give you a little bit of what we've been doing as well from a market engagement perspective. So as part of the migration activities, you'll see that we are capturing a BSP profile per market. So some of you may have been contacted. So this is just capturing key information, market specifics that we should know about in terms of how to reach out to the market. We also work with you in terms of engaging the local travel agent associations, airlines as well, working with them in terms of how they can leverage their networks to get the word out on NewGen ISS. Our focus has really been on having in-person workshops along with webinars where possible, having as well a trade show presence. Additionally, we have things like our e-learning available for free. We have email blasts that we do, targeted social media. And as well, the team has been doing a lot of follow-up with agents in terms of account opening. So if they're running into issues, sort of having that one-to-one follow-up to help them with their process. We see that actually quite on our NewGen ISS microsite. We see that when we have this targeted approach, we actually see the number of agents coming in from different markets quite substantial. So this is actually just a little bit of the microsite session details by our third quarter and fourth quarter countries. Okay, actually I had to exclude India because they kind of broke the stats, they were too high. So that's just a little bit of where we're at. And now in terms of where we're going, we have some as well developments coming in. So in terms of improving the overall user experience and let's say the product features, the product value, we are now looking at having multi-use IATA EasyPay numbers for Edenred. So as of November last year, Multi-Service, who is the other main IATA EasyPay provider, introduced multi-use numbers for wherever they are, and now we will have multi-use numbers as well for Edenred. So this will give agents the choice of either a single-use number, which for IATA EasyPay, or a number that they can enter on multiple bookings. Okay, the value there is that if they use a multi-use number, they don't have to re-log into the IATA EasyPay portal, generate a new number per transaction. That was one of the feedback, one of the pieces of feedback we had received was that, you know, having to generate a new number without an automated integration was quite cumbersome, and so this multi-use number should make it, let's say, a better solution for travel agents. We're also continuing to work on a new sort of model of IATA EasyPay. You don't need to know about model B+, A+, but just where we are facing some regulatory difficulties. There are some markets that are quite challenging. We have sort of a new approach that we'll have with our vendor, working with a local banking partner. And so what that will do is, where there are some sort of compliance challenges, the banking partner will be responsible for those, and so that will make it easier to introduce IAP. And then finally, upcoming as well, because we've had quite a bit of demand and interest, is we finally will have the Go Global accreditation coming in during the second half of the year. Okay, so that now is going to lead me into our campaign. So in terms of last year, we had quite an active campaign in terms of Airline Readiness. I want to thank all of you for your work in that. And we saw the results of that campaign in terms of the actual status of airlines, so being technically ready for NewGen ISS and or technically and strategically ready. So airlines in the green and dark green status have now reached about 82% of global BSP cash sales. So we've got a number of the key airlines worldwide now technically ready. And that's great, but this is disproportionately a smaller number of airlines. Okay, so we have quite a number of smaller carriers that are still not yet ready. So this year, what we'd like to continue is the engagement of carriers that were not reached during 2018. Okay, so in case there were some smaller airlines that weren't participating in any of the markets that went live last year, is to work with them to ensure they understand the NewGen ISS changes, understand why we're introducing IATA EasyPay, engage with them on technical readiness, and even strategic readiness. So strategic readiness being actually publishing one's policy on IATA EasyPay, hopefully in connection with TIP as well. And what we'd like to do this year as well is to re-engage those airlines in a yellow, orange, red status. So those who either last year indicated that they were preparing to be ready, so see where they're at now, and see how we can get them to a green status, at minimum technically ready, but hopefully strategically ready, and as well those in an orange and red status. And obviously, it is an airline's prerogative if they decide to opt out, in which case then it's a purple status. Okay, so here
Sorry,
again.
Andrea, I have a question. Could I ask right now, or shall we wait until the end of the
Sure,
webinar?
go ahead if you want.
Okay, it's about airlines opting out. What happens if the biggest carrier in the country opts out? That would affect this, am I right?
So that affects more the go live. If a carrier, so here we're looking at the global numbers. Okay, so what we have as a target when we go live in a country is that airlines representing 65% of the volumes in the country are IATA Easy Pay ready, okay, because that's a condition in resolution. Now, if we don't make that threshold, because for whatever reason the airline has opted out, we essentially have to go to PSG to ask for an exemption. And here we're not talking about 64% or 65%, but if we see a bigger gap there, we have to go back to PSG to almost ask for an exemption to go live. Now, what that means, though, and it's important that the airlines understand this aspect, is that means that if agents are not able or reach their RHC and they're not able to use Easy Pay, either they would not have a means to ticket, or they would have to either use credit card, or if the airline chooses instead of NewGen instead of Easy Pay to accept, for example, alternative transfer method or agent-owned cards, they just have to understand the consequences there, okay, particularly if they have a dominant position, because it's really going to restrict how the agent can transact in the BSP, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's important that because you'll see that as we get into, for example, closer to Peru and Bolivia, you'll see that we always see where we're at in terms of that individual market and whether we make that 60%, 65% threshold. Okay. And we know some carriers at the moment, for example, amongst ourselves, we have AA as one of the opt-outs, and obviously that will impact some of our countries. For example, I can think of Belize, where we'll be impacted in terms of reaching that threshold. Okay, so that's been flagged to PSG, for example. They already know of that market situation. Okay, so that's the first campaign. So really we're talking about a continuation of what we did last year, and as well then re-engaging those that we originally contacted and who are still sort of in that in-between stage. Additionally, we continue to have the campaigns to inform the markets, so ensuring that your APJCs and LCAGs are aware. So if it's a market that's already live, it's an opportunity to give them an update on where we're at, but also an opportunity to get feedback from agents and airlines in terms of how the past rollouts have gone. So that is something we welcome. I think it's valuable to give the local stakeholders an opportunity to voice how they feel it went. For those of you that have not already done this, it's also important if you've gone live to make sure you have that LFC review, okay, if not already done. Same thing for upcoming markets. Here it's more about informing the timelines and again initiating that LFC review if you have not already started. Amber completed a number of the gap analyses last year, so that should have, I guess, resolved for most of you. If there's any sort of 2020 markets that you may not have received the gap analysis just yet, I know that Amber will be finalizing those. Okay, so again, that's very much a continuation of what we did last year. The big changes, I guess, now as more countries are live, it's a status update and an ability to gather feedback. And then finally, this is the new one. It's one of the things that we have, let's say, included as a campaign this year, is to directly engage with some top 10 agents in markets in terms of ensuring that they are aware and prepared for the NewGen ISS changes. Okay, so this is complementing some of the other market engagement activities in terms of, for example, reaching out to new agents, informing the market. But here, from, let's say, key account management, it's important to go to these agents, ensure they're aware, gather feedback, and also potentially encourage adoption. Okay, so this is the new campaign versus the other two. Okay, so these are the three campaigns for NewGen ISS. Any questions before I head us into TIP? Okay, so very, very quiet. So then let's start with transparency in payments. So where are we with TIP? Well, like with NewGen ISS, PACCONF adopted the resolution in November of 2017, and in April of 2018, we started to have the first launch, so the first initial functionalities available, okay? And then that was in terms of at a market level, allowing for the enrollment of products and the consent to be managed by airlines, again, at a country level. Then we proceeded to have a couple of the key developments last year, which was the ability for then airlines to break down that consent from being at a country level to being at an individual agent level. And then the third key, let's say, functional release was really around having agents enlist their individual agent-owned cards. So here where we're talking about sort of more the hard plastic cards, not a van, enroll their cards and have airlines essentially give consent or not to the use of that agent-owned card. Okay, so those were last year's key releases. We're expecting that by July, all functionalities will be rolled out. And what's really pending is upfront validation capabilities, and as well improving some of our detection capabilities. So some of the statistical analysis that we do in terms of potential detection of non-compliances. Okay, so as of right now, we have TIP, as I mentioned, live in 52 countries, okay, and those 52 markets represent approximately 57% of the worldwide card sales through the BSP. By the end of this year, the expectation is that we will actually have reached 95% of card sales. Okay, the board target for TIP is actually a little different than NewGen. So their target is, again, that TIP is live in markets representing 95% of card sales. Okay, so that is expected to be reached by September of this year. So the key markets will be rolled out this year. But then between September and December, we see that the progress is actually quite incremental, okay, because once those key markets are achieved, there's very little card sales in a number of those more challenging ones. Okay, and then whatever is left being in 2020. Okay, so just a reminder, I'm going to go through all these. I'm going to go quickly through this. A reminder of how TIP works. So first is the enrollment. So we have the alternative transfer method provider register essentially, and then once registered, they can enroll their products. Once those products are enrolled, then the airline is able to manage their consent via BSP link, and that can be validated by an agent, so they can check for what they have received airline consent, which then will impact how they ticket. Okay, what we are looking at introducing is B4, which is the upfront validation. So prior to having an agent actually ticket, there is a pre-ticketing validation which will check if the airline has consented to that product. Okay. In addition to that upfront validation, we'd still have the post-transaction monitoring in order to detect any potentially non-compliant transactions, those reports being sent to the airline. And then in case of a potential infringement, having the airline have that information, but then it would be incumbent upon them to address those infringements on a bilateral basis with the agent. Okay, so each airline is actually responsible for that follow-up. It's only if there's a pattern of abuse that can be resolved bilaterally, there's the potential to then escalate that to an arbitrating party, namely the TAC. Okay, so in terms of this, we have now already, as I said, the ability for airlines to define their consent for enrolled products, both at a country level, at an agent level, and also now the ability for them to define their consent for any agent's own cards that an agent has enrolled. The airlines also receive alerts whenever new provider products are available, and they're getting their post-transaction monitoring reports. In terms of the agent side, they have the ability to consult to see which products they receive consent for. As of November last year, they were able to start enrolling their own cards, okay? And also they can set up email alerts to be notified whenever there is a change of consent. Now, as of now, we still have only 2 ATM products which have been enrolled. Okay, there's a number of discussions, but we still have only 2 products. Now, this is not, I think it's important, the key functionality that TIP or service or value that TIP is bringing is really on in terms of the transparency and the let's say potential non-compliance reports that airlines are receiving. Okay, but we still think this will be a valuable service, particularly from an agent side. So we know that some issuers are now talking with airlines and with agents. You know, and although it's not the key measure of success, which is really for us, it's detection, we do think that there is value. So if someone comes to you and says, I want to be able, as for example, as a travel agent, they come to you and say, I want to use a product, but it's not enrolled yet, well, there's an opportunity there to come back to them and really to have them go to their provider to have that enrollment process initiated so they can reach out to IATA to enroll their product. Okay, I think this will come from the ground up in terms of enrollment. Now, some stats. So to date, we see that there's some 26,000 reports generated every month. 142 airlines have downloaded at least one report just in the month of January. One of the biggest things that we hear is that we see agents saying, well, I don't know what the purpose is of product enrollment if I'm not getting consent. So agents have enrolled their own cards. We see 116 as of January, and 61 of them had received consent from at least one airline. So really it is a bilateral commercial decision between an airline and an agent, the acceptable forms of payment that the airline will consent to. Okay, so some stats to know.
And if I may comment, this is something I have mentioned to the TIP team. We have received some, not complaints, but comments from agents that they have been enrolling their cards, but they haven't been receiving the consent from the airline. So I told the TIP team to make sure they mention that to the airlines during the external webinars.
Okay. No, I think it's important. I would say, obviously, it's going to be ultimately an airline decision. So, by the same token, I think it's important for agents to then reach out to the carriers if they do want to obtain that consent. I think. Right. So yes, it's a two-way street. So the airlines will always make their own commercial decisions, and then the agents as well need to make sure they do that engagement if they want to have it available. Good. So now just a little bit of an overview on where we're at in terms of virtual card use. Last year we did a similar exercise in terms of assessing the growth of these VANs, these virtual cards. Last year the assessment was actually only a limited number of countries, and this year we've been doing an exercise, and actually we've included all of the markets. Okay, so global volumes have been assessed, and we see that still, despite the fact of having TIP in place, we still actually see the volume of virtual cards growing. So between 2017 and 2018, it grew about 31%. And vans now represent approximately 8% of total BSP card sales. So they're quite a significant percentage of card sales. Okay, so this assessment is only looking again at vans with some bin ranges that we know and have identified. If we consider, for example, agents' own cards or other products that have not yet been identified, we can expect that that volume is actually substantially higher. Okay, so they make up more than 8% of card volumes. Okay, now despite the fact that we have this growth, we see that there's key differences between markets and also between airlines. Okay, so some airlines have seen actually a significant decrease in their amounts of van usage, whereas other carriers have seen a significant increase. Okay, now with TIP, basically we're supporting airlines to define their own strategy. Okay, so they this is not to say that it's bad or good, and this slide is only for internal use only, but that they have a basis now for their discussions as airlines. And as well, there is, we know that carriers who have seen some of these increases are actually aware of their increases. So it's not coming as a surprise. Because of TIP, those that have seen increases are actually aware. And again, whenever we talk about vans, it's important that airlines actually consider their own individual payment strategy, and whatever that strategy is actually communicated to. Where an airline has actively communicated that they don't accept cards, we see actually their volumes going down. So the market is reacting in that sense. Okay. One other thing to highlight, because I was talking about airlines, is we do see variances across countries. So we saw primarily Europe as the target of vans, but now that's sort of creeping out into other countries. So we see Japan, Hong Kong was quite substantial, and we see some new markets coming in. For example, we see Canada coming up on this list, South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, from the Americas. Okay. Questions on this? And again, this is for internal use. Please don't distribute this externally. No? Okay. So what's next? So in terms of next functionalities coming out, we are looking at improving the reporting. So reports that identify unusual statistical patterns. Okay, so right now we have a pilot happening with some airlines from PSG and from PMWG. And these statistical patterns, the goal is to identify potentially unknown products or use of agents on cards that haven't been enrolled. So we've done a proof of concept. We're now expanding it, and we hope to have the full solution by the third quarter. And the purpose here really is detection of unenrolled products cards, and then it being upon the airline to take action as they see fit, if at all. Okay. We also will be publishing by Tuesday of next week individual airlines report, so a full year report of van usage globally. Okay, so if we go back to the previous slide, we're sort of taking this and looking at the stats for the global use for each individual airline. So that's going to be published, and it's not published via BSP link, it's published to the key airline contact in terms of payments through the customer portal. Okay. Then in terms of airline reporting, we're also looking at how we can enhance the process. So consolidated reports that would be available through, again, the customer portal rather than BSP link. And in case you missed it, airlines are now able to upload their payment policies to agents through BSP link. Okay, so normally there's a charge associated to any communication uploads to agents for airlines. With the payment acceptance policy, that right now is free of charge, so an airline can request that happen. Finally, one of the things we're also looking at is that upfront validation. Okay, we don't have let's say commitment from any of the GDSs for this upfront validation. So we're looking at a solution that would be based on API. That would work, for example, for both NDC and GDS sales, but wouldn't need the involvement of any GDS. Okay, so we're looking at how that can happen. We would need as well an airline to pilot that, so something to consider. Okay, now in terms of the rollout, I think I missed the slide for NewGen. I must have gone through too fast. In terms of the rollout for TIP, we will have a calendar very similar to NewGen ISS, except for those countries in blue. So those are countries which will be accelerated from the NewGen ISS schedule. Okay, so NewGen ISS will be rolling out this year and with a number of countries in 2020. There's some more complexity, let's say, with EasyPay, etc. And with TIP, we really hope to have most countries this year. I think Tunisia is the one exception. Now, if NewGen accelerates a market, what TIP will do is they will also follow suit. However, if there's, for example, a delay with the NewGen ISS country, as sometimes we have some, say, regulatory issues with EasyPay, etc., which cause a market to be delayed, then TIP will keep their same schedule, their first schedule, and NewGen ISS will follow it at a later date. Okay. Now, the other thing that's sort of come up recently is that we may have some issues with TIP in China. The volumes in terms of card sales are actually quite low, but in China, because they don't use BSP Link, they use something called ASD. The fact that the new front end is delayed means that we would not be able to use it the same way. To launch the same way. We were really counting on having new front end launched in China in order to be able to generate the reports, etc. So we'll see how and what can be done for China this year. Okay. Now, in terms of the country go lives, just similar to, for example, NewGen ISS, we have been organizing monthly webinars. Well, the TIP team has been organizing monthly webinars for agents and airlines. So minimum once per month, an agent and airline webinar for those around the go live date. They can also organize additional ones. And as well, some videos are available in case anyone wants sort of hands-on tutorials on some of the functionalities. So you have this link. Now, taking us to the TIP campaigns. So for TIP, we will have similar campaigns to NewGen ISS. One item that is not a campaign is what we call the TIP CEO brief. Okay, this is actually includes both NewGen and TIP. This is basically a brief that goes out to the Board of Governors airlines, so the members of the board, with their status on TIP. They'll have the same thing on NewGen, and also on NDC, they usually send something out as well. So what we will ask of you is that when that happens, and that's June and December, we'll ask you to validate the information on that brief before it is actually shared with the board member airline. Okay. So that takes us down to readiness. So that brief actually discusses an airline's readiness for TIP. Okay, and we see that last year there was quite a bit of progress in terms of airlines' overall readiness. Okay, and from October to January, for example, we see readiness going from 40 to 58%. So this is, again, due to much of your work in terms of contacting airline, ensuring that airlines are informed of what is NewGen, what is TIP, and that they start preparing for it. Okay. However, if we look at the first two pie charts, those are reflecting airlines by their share of volume. Okay, so airlines representing 58% of volumes are ready as of January. However, again, that doesn't necessarily reflect in terms of total number of carriers. So we have a lot of smaller airlines, small to mid-sized airlines, who are still not TIP ready. Okay. So this year, we continue to have that campaign at headquarter level to ensure that airlines understand what has happened with Resolution 890, so those changes, and consequently what we're doing with TIP. Okay, so the different functionalities available. So with that campaign, also presenting our migration timelines. So this is an opportunity here to, again, see what their status is. Are they ready? Do they have a payment acceptance policy? Have they published it to agents? Okay. And the scope will be any of the airlines with card sales that have not yet been contacted in 2018. Now, we'd also like to have a readiness check, similar to NewGen, with those airlines that are in a yellow, orange, red status. So hopefully in April, September, is have a check and get a status update. You know, have they had any progress in terms of defining their payment acceptance policy, etc. And then, like with NewGen, just informing local APJCs and LCAGs. Here it's, again, more of a project update and informing them of timelines. So whenever you have your next meeting, an opportunity again. And since you see the overlap here, it's an opportunity to present both NewGen with TIP at the same time. So that's it, I believe. So I'll leave it to everyone for questions. Very quiet.
Andrea, this is Amandine speaking. Thank you for this presentation. It's actually good for me because it put me back into, you know, all those nice subjects that I didn't look at.
You were missing so much on that
So
leave, yes.
thank you for that. Well, actually, in our team, it's Attila who is taking care of those campaigns. So he could not attend today because he was participating in a training, but I'm sure that if he has questions, he will contact either you or Karina, I guess. So on my side, I don't have any questions, but I guess Attila will have some if he does. Yeah.
No problem. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Amandine, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions, but I do engage with Attila on a daily basis regarding these campaigns, so well covered.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, actually, if I have some questions, I'll let you know, but so far, so good, I believe. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, and everybody that participated.
And good luck this year with your campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Have a nice weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.